Om Shri Yamadharmarajaya Namaha. Om Shri Kalindi Nadyai Namaha. Om Shri Kalindyai Namaha. Om Shri Mahakalyai Namaha. Om Shri Yamuna Nadyai Namaha. Om Yama Yamunayai Namo Namaha. Namaskaram. Wish you all a very fulfilling yama dvitiyā, a fraternal Bhai Dooj. Once again, we'll not rest satisfied with the story time alone, the mythical stories, but go to the depth of it and see what we can leverage into our lives for this. In this context, Yama or Yami just refer to twins. It also refers to restraint. It refers to regulation, as we have seen. And in particular, we are talking of the twins Yama and Yami. Yami being the original name of river Yamuna. Both being kids of Surya and Sanya. Sanya over time has become Sandhya, which is essentially a joint, as we discussed earlier, and therefore very, very critical. But even if you look at it, the original name of Sanya, Nya stands for the knowledge, and Sang is something which is auspicious, an auspicious knowledge, which is one of the energies of our soul or Surya. Now, what is created out of this union of our Atma, Brahman or soul on the one hand, and the good or auspicious knowledge or the joint or the unifying force, Sandhya or Sanya on the other hand, is as a pair of twins, Yama and Yamuna, also known as Kalindi. That's why I'm wearing the Mahakali Yantra today, because Kali and Yamuna are very closely related. In fact, if you see Yamuna, I love this river on which Sri Krishna had his pastimes. But if you look at it, for most parts, it looks dark. Very rare for a river to look like that. There are certain seas which are dark, like the Black Sea. But if you look at Kalindi, the name is very, very appropriate. Because of the turbulence in the river, you see that it has this darkness associated with it. And Kaliya, the poisonous snake, was said to manifest it until Krishna calmed it down with his dance, with his feet. And what is Krishna? Once again, our attractiveness. Our ability to magnetically attract can calm even the most vicious of our thoughts and potentially vicious actions and speeches as well. And this darkness is also associated with Yama, typically picturized on a dark water buffalo with a dark skin, either black or blue. Once again, showing the beauty of this wonderful color, black, its ability to attract everything that is incident upon it. an all-embracing attitude, and which is again typical of not only Krishna but Shiva, that which is not like a black hole, just absorbing whatever comes its way and making it its own, not in a possessive sense, but becoming one with it. That oneness in nothingness is what is typical of Mahakali and Yamuna as well. And that's why you saw the picture of Kali depicted over here in this Bholenath collection. Bhole being innocent and Nath being the master of innocence. So this is essentially what we celebrate today. And very specially this year, it happens once in 8 years or so, is that it's on a Saturday. And Saturday is associated with Saturn, which is Shanaishchara. The slow-moving patience and perseverance that we have associated with our Mooladhara Chakra. Whereas Yama is associated with the Manipura Chakra, very fiery. And that's why typically a lot of Sanatana Dharmis associate death with a funeral pyre rather than a burial or the other alternative, common alternative being dumping the dead body into a river or any water body which flows, which is again symbolic of Yamuna. So this pair of Yama and Yamuna is associated with darkness, with Krishna, with Shiva, with Kali, with death. And in this beautiful pair, which is co-born, unlike what I depicted just day before yesterday on Deepavali Amavasya, the Ardhanarishwara Tattva. I'm glad many of you recognize that. Thanks for many of your replies on WhatsApp that you recognized that I was trying to portray Ardhanarishwara through my costume that day. You're right. And what we have today, not necessarily conjoined twins, but twins of very, very similar characteristics, Yama and Yamuna. Now, instead of thinking of them as a male god and a female goddess, bring them much closer to us affectionately. And then you recognize Yama is that half of you. Rather, let me show this way. That half of you, which is Yama, the masculine restraint that you self-impose in the requirement for a long-term bliss, even if it means sacrificing a short-term pain or going through even suffering for that matter, even though it might be optional, just so that you can accomplish something much bigger in the long run. So the horse for the long run, as we call it, instead of being penny wise and pound foolish, or paisa wise and rupee foolish. Now let's look at Yamuna. She once again has the same characteristics as Yama, being co-born, and therefore Yamuna is also that aspect of us, that feminine, powery, energetic aspect of us, which helps us to maintain those restraints, those self-imposed restraints. So here's a culture, a tradition, Sanatana Dharma, which never needed something like the 10 Commandments, where there is an imposition. And then what do people do? Try to see loopholes and try to avoid those restraints, avoid those regulations. But here, it's out of one's own free will, out of an understanding that if we want to follow those regulations, whether masculine or feminine, if we were to follow those regulations, then we would achieve something far more important and significant in life than if we were to run after our desires and likes, becoming slaves to that. Many people think that just chasing their likes and running away from their dislikes is freedom. No, it's the worst kind of slavery, drudgery that you can have. Exactly opposite of independence. It is total dependence on the whims and fancies of your sense organs and mind, which are your tools. So you become slaves to your tools if you think that following your likes, following your heart to wherever it goes is great. No, there needs to be a self-restraint. We know the hierarchy that we have been talking about. The sense organs have to be controlled by the body has to be controlled by the mind has to be more than controlled, regulated would be an appropriate word. So the mind has to be regulated by the intellect, and the intellect has to be regulated by the prana, or the life, vital force, vital life energy, and the Atma has to regulate in turn the prana. Then we are moving towards moksha, the ultimate goal, or we are stuck up with dharma, artha, kama, or moksha. And it's for a reason that I'm showing these four purusharthas, or the sanctioned goals of human life, in four different directions, because this particular direction of south, I'm facing east by the way, so this particular direction towards my right or your left of south is associated with the Dikpalaka Yama. Indra, Agni, Yama, Nirutti, Varuna, Vayu, Kubera, and Ishanya. So you see that Dharmaraja, Yama, who is nothing but a personification of our own duty consciousness, following the regulations. In other words, the don'ts. If you think of do's and don'ts, the do's are the niyamas, which is the second limb of Patanjali Maharishi's Ashtanga Yoga, the eight-limbed yoga. The first one is yama, which is the don'ts or the regulations. In English, we say rules and regulations. Here it is regulations and rules. So you're first told what you're, and we in English again we say do's and don'ts. Here it is don'ts and do's out of one's own free will. And these don'ts or regulations are 5 in number, followed by the rules or do's, which are also 5 in number. And that's not a coincidence. It's associated with these 5 dimensions of who we are, as I already told you. So the 5 yamas to start with, which is very significant for today, which are the don'ts or the regulations, those are ahimsa, which is for the body, the satya, which is for the mind, asteya or non-stealing. This I assume you know, ahimsa means non-violence and satya means non-lying, which is also translated as truth or truthfulness. And then you're talking of, at the intellectual level, you're talking of asteya or non-stealing. See, we had the idea of patents, trademarks, copyrights right up then. Then we are talking asteya, not non-stealing. And then we have at the prana level, brahmacharya. That is a conduct in the sense of Brahman, not with our false identifications with the body, mind, intellect. And finally, at the level of the Atma or soul, aparigraha, the what we call as non-possessiveness. Because at the Brahman level, we know that we are one. There's no such thing as you and me. It's only we, and we alone that there is. So there's no question of possessiveness. Possessiveness comes only when you see two or more, the duality or plurality. Here we're talking of non-duality, and that is essentially what automatically leads to a parigraha. And so these are the 5 yamas, and then you similarly have the 5 niyamas, which are the rules. And niyama is also something that I'm talking about today on the day of yama dvitiyā, because this yama itself means a twin. Dvitiyā is reinforcing the fact that it is a twin. It's the second day after Amavasya, and therefore the dvitiyā. So it's talking about the twos. And niyama is actually another name for Yamuna. If you remember in the Ramayana, before it was written, we needed a poet. The first poet of this entire humanity, which is Adi Kavi, Valmiki Maharishi, more than 7,700 years ago, who was asked by Narada when he was found to be a small wayside robber, who today, in today's technology, we call a highway robber, or even a pirate, a sea pirate, or a hijacker for that matter. So to convert him, or a garvapsi, so to speak, of him to the Sanatana Dharma way of life, what Narada Maharishi asked him is to just chant the name of Rama. But he was not able to pronounce that, not knowing that particular word. But he was familiar with trees, which he called Mara, and he was ready to say that. But when he kept on saying Mara, 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 it became Rama, Rama, Rama over a period of time. And whether you know or not, when you chant these wonderful sound vibrations, in which the names and forms are so intricately connected with each other, you would see that the effect is already achieved. The meaning is right there. So now, same way, if you think of niyama, over a period of time, it becomes Yamuna. It's Yamani, but the ni, when it comes to the end, becomes a na, according to the grammar rules. And therefore, the yama and niyama of Patanjali Maharishi, the regulations and rules, or don'ts and do's, respectively, is what is referred to as the twin children of Surya, that is our soul, and Sanya, that is our knowledge, auspicious knowledge, or the ability to put things together, which is Sandhya. And out of that, these twins of Yama and Niyama are born. And these, as I said earlier, are out of our own free will. To give you an example, it's been about 25, probably more than that, 1995, so 26 years since I've been a vegetarian. And the very way in which it started was, I was part of this organization called the Hindu Students Council in the US, in Atlanta, at Georgia Tech, as a part of its chapter. And we were reading the Bhagavad Gita and talking about various gunas, the qualities, sattva, rajas, tamas, which we have discussed in detail in our channel as well. And we saw that the foods also can be classified in this way. And there was a heated argument between the vegetarians and non-vegetarians over there. And I, being a non-vegetarian, didn't take up that argument, but just was watching it and felt that if something had to be really learned, understood, one needs to experiment with it, test it, if it is possible. And in this case, it was very easy. I was a non-vegetarian, though a very rare non-vegetarian, eating once a week at the most, or once in a month or so. But I thought, let me have it and see what happens, and without it, what happens. And this experiment was so wonderful at the body level, the mind level, the intellectual level, the spirit level, the way in which I could study, I could work, I could do my research. all went through, and my relationships, everything went through a dramatic change for the better. So you cannot, of course, compare a particular person who's non-vegetarian and a vegetarian and say that the vegetarian person is always better than the non-vegetarian. There are, in fact, in my own experience, I've seen lots of examples to the contrary. I know many non-vegetarians who are far more wonderful people than a few of the vegetarians. So there are exceptions like that. But what is more important is a given person, I, who was a non-vegetarian 26 years back, when I turned vegetarian, within a year, I could see the huge evolution that I had gone through. So each person, if he's a vegetarian now, whatever level he might be in, he might be good or bad, but if he becomes a non-vegetarian, he would probably become less better or far worse. On the same, as a corollary, a non-vegetarian, if he's a great person today, he would become a greater person by giving up his non-vegetarian food. And there's no rule that you have to give up, but it's up to each individual person. But they can experiment and see. And I'm talking about this, I usually don't, but I'm talking about this because this experiment worked for me. And there's no harm in you experimenting with it. If you're already a vegetarian, well and good. But if you're a non-vegetarian, just see for yourself. You might already be far better in your qualities and characteristics compared to any vegetarian. Doesn't matter. Our goal is always to become a better person. For example, in my case, I should become a better Dinesh tomorrow than I am today. And today I am a better Dinesh than I was yesterday. So same way, you can see how you can improvise by bringing in certain experiments within yourself. And that's the reason why ahimsa is the first yama that is given there, non-violence. And vegetarianism is just one step towards ahimsa. There are so many other advantages. I can have a whole series about this ahimsa and vegetarianism as a small part of it. But let's explore, at least a few of us. Let's explore that and see. I have already done it and I'm telling you the result of that experiment, and I would strongly encourage you to do that as well. And so those were the 5 yamas, the ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya and aparigraha. Similarly, you have the 5 niyamas, which is associated with yamuna instead of yama, and these are shaucha for the body, physical body, cleansing, then santosha for the mind, the contentment, and then swadhyaya, which is for the intellect, reflection on whatever knowledge you're gaining through self-study. That is your swadhyaya. It could be reading, it could be hearing, watching YouTube videos like this. All of this is swadhyaya. And then the 4th one is tapas or penance at the prana level. You're trying to follow certain restrictions on yourself, which is not actually the yama that you already did, the don'ts, but this is a penance. You're taking up certain things that you would like to achieve and going ahead and focusing upon that. So that is essentially what we call as penance or tapas, associated with the Agnya Chakra. And finally, the Ishvara pranidhana, which is essentially becoming one with Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi, or I am Atma Brahma. So the contemplation leads forward to going beyond meditation to samadhi state, when you become one with the everythingness or nothingness, depending on which way you look at it. It's one and the same. So oneness of nothingness and everythingness with you and me. So that's essentially a state that you go to as part of the Ishvara Pranidhana. So that's basically what yama and niyama actually stand for. And the wonderful Rigvedic mantras associated with yama, as well as Kalindi or Yami or Yamuna, and Adi Shankaracharya, of course, he's written an Ashtakam on pretty much every deity that we have created, and this particular deity of Yamuna that we have created, on that also he has written the Yamuna Ashtakam, all of whose 8 stanzas end with this particular line: Dhuno tuno manomalam kalinda nandini sada. That's the line with which every one of those 8 stanzas end with. Murarikaya kalimala lamavari dharini trunikruta trivishtapa triloka shoka harini manonukula kula kuncha puncha dhuta durmada dhunotu no manomalam kalinda nandini sadam, and so on. That's just the first stanza. So 8 stanzas like that. Now, I was telling you, Yama is associated with the southern direction, and Shaneshra, today being a Saturday, is associated with the western direction. And both of these were half brothers, or both were sons of our soul. Our soul, or Atma, created our patience, which is Shaneshra, and created our restrictions, or self-imposed restrictions, which is Yama, or duty consciousness, you can call it. That's why it's also called as Yama Dharma Raja, and associated with the Manipura Chakra, just like Ayyappa, who is a Dharma Shasta. So Dharma Shasta or Dharma Raja is one and the same, and it's Dharma Raja's son, who is Yudhishthira, who as you know, is also called as Dharmaraja, by the way. Dharmaraja, Yama Dharmaraja's son, Yudhishthira, the Dharmaraja as well. Dharma is, of course, the duty consciousness, the self-imposed restrictions which enable us to perform our duties to our maximum capabilities, and go on increasing those capacities and capabilities so that we be even better at performing our duties towards everything that we come across. It's not just the professional duties alone, or the family duties alone, or social duties alone, but also your spiritual duties. So duties all at all the 5 levels, actually, so to speak. And so that is enabled. And the fact that today is Yama dvitiyā and Shanivara, that is Saturday, means that the west and the south become very significant. Most people say it has to be always east facing or north facing when you do certain things. Yes, for a lot of materialistic things, that's important, because the eastern direction is associated with Indra, and the kama, or desires, get satisfied by looking at that way. Whereas here, you're in the northern direction, it is Kubera, associated with the other of the Purusharthas, which is Artha, and therefore your prosperity increases. And as the combination of these two, the northeast is also considered very auspicious as the Ishanya Mula, where both prosperity and satisfaction of desires happens. So many people ignore the other directions, in particular the southern direction, the western direction, and the southwest direction. But for us who are in the spiritual path, these have very, very strong implications as well. So I already told you, this is about our patience and perseverance, and this is about our duty consciousness. So this is associated with actually moksha, the ultimate purushartha, the liberation, the nirvana, the mukti. And this particular direction is associated with dharma, Yama Dharma Raja. So southern direction, and that duty consciousness. So in fact, when we list out the purusharthas, we always say dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So you see this axis that is developing. Dharma, artha is one axis of Yama and Kubera, and similarly kama, moksha is the other axis, the east-west axis of Indra and Varuna. So this again, Indra and Varuna are very closely related. Indra is associated with thunder, lightning, etc. And Varuna is associated with water, rains, etc. And both are when you have a thunderstorm, very often you have the rain as well. So it's the result of that. So you see that these axes are very, very significant. And it's not just the north-south axis and the east-west axis alone, but even the southwest to northeast axis. And that's why southwest is very significant. Today I wanted to talk about it because it's nirutti. And southwest is the median of south and west, right? That's why we call it the southwest, 45 degrees over here. This particular direction is the southwest, the nirutti direction. The reason why that is so significant is that today is a Saturday and this is yama dvitiyā. Of course, this becomes all the more significant, but any day for that matter. This particular direction is associated with disorder, with chaos, with entropy. In fact, I call this this is the direction of increasing entropy, and this is northeast is the direction of decreasing entropy. So you can call this as the axis of entropy. Similarly, you can call this the axis of enthalpy. That is the energy, because you see, this is associated with Agni. This many people know, the southeast direction, because they always put, according to Vastu or Feng Shui, they put the kitchen over there and say this is Agni Mula. So from materialistic perspectives, we have a little bit of this knowledge, but these can be enhanced to the spiritual sadhana as well. So this is the axis of energy, because fire is energy, of course, and fire is enabled by Vayu. This is the northwest direction, which is associated with Vayu, and this is the southeast direction associated with Agni. And so this is the axis of enthalpy. And you know that enthalpy and entropy are related to each other through the change in the free energy equation. Gibbs free energy change, for example, is given by change in enthalpy, and the other term there is the temperature times the change in the entropy. And so these are all kind of related, and it's very beautiful when you draw these diagrams, etc. Because the general audience, I do not want to go too much into the details of the thermodynamics, physics, and the scientific aspects. I'm just giving you a cursory overview in terms of terms that most people understand, because these are all basically middle school or at the most high school physics terms that many of you will be familiar with, even if you're not into science or engineering, etc. as your profession. But what I'm trying to say is that the scientific principles and spirituality are not at all different from each other. In fact, as you go deeper and deeper into science, you see spirituality. And similarly, as you go deeper and deeper into spirituality, you see science. And at the most mature level of both of these, you would see that they are actually one and the same. Many people think of it as science versus spirituality, but there is a yoga between these two. It's only textbook scientists or just school level scientists who tend to think that these are different, because that's what we've been taught. And of course, when they think of spirituality, they are thinking of religion, where of course there's a huge difference, the belief systems and things like that. No, spirituality doesn't require any belief systems. It's all experiments. Just like the other experiment I just described a few minutes back, everything is an experiment. You experiment with yourself. Instead of experimenting on the outer world, you're experimenting with your inner world. And that's essentially your spirituality. And everything is measurable, and of course, in terms of the infinity that you have, it's just a quantity that you're talking about in a very metaphorical sense of what we described as the Shanti Mantra even yesterday. Aum Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate, which can be thought of as a definition not only for infinity but for zero as well, showing that everythingness and nothingness are the same with oneness as well. And this is the beautiful thing that Patanjali Maharishi has codified into these 5 yamas and 5 niyamas. And this is how I see niyama as nothing but Yamuna, and the twin of the yamas. And yama and niyama always go together. And these yamas and niyamas, we just follow them as rules because it's a game that we are all in. When you, let's say, go and play cricket, you need to follow the rules of cricket. So there's a certain way in which you need to bowl, and you saw people getting into trouble, like Muthaiya Muralidharan or a few others being called for wrong bowling action and then going through a ban and being tested and then being brought back, etc. So there are certain rules that you need to follow. You can't do chucking or throwing, for example. And so there's a certain range of operations that you have, which you call as the rules. That's what makes the game so exciting. For example, basketball is played with the hands, and soccer or football is played with the feet. Now you can't say I'm a very good basketball player. The hands are my best assets, so I will play football or soccer also with my hands. It doesn't work that way, right? You will spoil the game not only for yourself but for the other teammates and the opposition as well. So there are certain rules that you follow. They say, when in Rome, be a Roman. Similarly, at times, different times and different stages of life, etc., you follow certain conditions, and those conditions are, when once it is imposed by the parents or by the teachers or by the society or by the government, then it feels like a restriction. When it is self-imposed, you see that it's going to bring me long-term bliss, even if it means sacrificing some short-term happiness for it, or pleasures, bodily pleasures, emotional, intellectual pleasures. Sometimes we sacrifice in order to achieve great things. Even in our work, sometimes we are just going on working, and you don't even feel that time is passing. You just get so involved with it, right? So in that sense, there are certain small things you sacrifice, you achieve far bigger things, not because of somebody imposing certain things called ethics or morals or the commandments, etc., but out of your own volition, you're self-imposing these yamas and niyamas, just experimenting with them. If it doesn't work for you, well and good, leave it and go for something else. So, I was talking about the axis, right? This is the axis of entropy. This is the axis of enthalpy. Similarly, you have between dharma, which is your duty, and artha, the earning that you get out of your dharma, is essentially the axis of the action functional, whereas this is the action of the reaction function, axis of the reaction functional, the east-west, associated with the kama or desire, and moksha or the ultimate desire. This is essentially an effect. This is a cause and this is an effect kind of relationship that you have, with the north-south being the causal direction and the east-west being the effect, how your desires are satisfied and how your eventual ultimate goal of moksha is achieved, which is a liberation from the cycle of birth and death. So, there are far more very, very interesting things about this. So any of you are interested, do let me know, and I can make probably a series of videos associated with that. I don't know the number of people interested in these things. For me, it's like probably lifetimes of bliss and ecstasy in being through these things. But I don't know how many of you can actually relate to that. If you just send me a feedback in terms of how these things are helping you evolve further in your spiritual path, and you think that these are going to be of significance, and you see that you could probably understand some of these scientific terms, etc., if I explain from the spiritual perspective or the spirituality from a scientific perspective, then I could probably make a series which goes far deeper into the scientific depth, and also my own spiritual experiences that I can share in that context. So thank you. It's been a wonderful set of 5 days, just like for Navaratri, the 9 nights. We had a wonderful time together, all of us. We celebrated it by having discourse on each of the goddesses: Shailaputri, Brahmacharini, Chandraganta, Kushmanda, Skandamata, Katyayani, Kalaratri, Mahagauri, and of course, Siddhidatri. And we saw the spiritual significance of that. That series is also still available on katham.in. And these 5 days have been a wonderful addition to that. I've always told you these two are related. In fact, the Kedarishwari or Kedara Gauri Vrata is what connects these two, starting on the Vijayadashmi day and culminating with the Dīvāli Amavasya. And from the Dīvāli Amavasya onwards, the Skanda Shashti Vrata has started, the 6-day wonderful thing, which will end up with the Sura Samharam, or the ability to transform our lethargy, laziness, and tamasic gunas to rajasic gunas. This would happen on this Tuesday evening and will continue till Wednesday afternoon. That is the time period for the Shashti Tithi, the 6th day. And today, after the dvitiyā ends tonight, in fact tonight itself, the tritiyā will start, and Moondram Pirai after Deepavali is very, very auspicious. So if the sky is clear without being cloudy in your location wherever you are, do take a look at the moon, which is just a outer reflection of your mind, and enjoy your adrushta, which is essentially your own karma, the good aspects of it, the auspicious aspects of it coming back to you in full measure. So with this, we conclude this Deepavali series. So once again, I wish you very, very auspicious Deepavali, not only for these 5 days, but for the entire year following, until we meet again for the next Deepavali, to further enhance this level of auspiciousness from all these 5 different aspects that we so intimately discussed with each other. And as always, I eagerly look forward to your questions, doubts, suggestions, feedback, whatever you might have, because I really want this to be something that enhances your life. I have had such a wonderful enhancement of my life through all these sadhana, the spiritual practices, that I don't want you to be devoid of that, bereft of that. So just if not everything, each of one of us has different initial conditions, as I've always jokingly told in this initial value problem. But whatever applies to you in your life, if you can take certain aspects, not just because I'm saying it, you just follow, try to follow that, and you would see that it does wonders. Because as I said, it's a game, and these are certain rules we follow in the game. Out of our own self-volition, we enjoy the game and make others enjoy the game of life as well. So all the rules are my rules, and that kind of conviction when you have, nobody else will be imposing their rules on you. You yourself will accept the rules as your own rules, so that you can convert this law of karma to a game of Leela, and you can increase the challenge levels of your game of life, and you can enjoy it much better than just playing a level 1 kindergarten baby game. Let's do what our spiritual maturity, whatever it is, let's play the game at that level. Namaskaram. So once again, may the Mahakali Yantra that you see here take you towards the dark energy that is the ultimate liberation that you could ever have. And may the blessings of Mother Mahakali, of Yamuna River, of Yamadharma Raja, and Shri Krishna, Radha, and all the other deities, nothing but ourself alone. I am Atma Brahma, Aham Brahmasmi. I bless you, you bless me, we bless each other. Namaskaram.